Everyone loved Fred MacMurray on screen, the sweet dad from My Three Sons, Disney's favorite star. But in real life, he was Hollywood's worst nightmare. He got into a fistfight with Humphrey Bogart, harassed his female co-stars, and was so impossible to work with that even the great Alfred Hitchcock said, "No thanks." For 50 years, he fooled America. Now, the shocking truth about TV's favorite father figure is finally coming out. Fred MacMurray was born on August 30, 1908, in Carquet, Illinois. His birth happened by chance. His father, Frederick, was a concert violinist performing in the town when Fred's mother, Meta, unexpectedly went into labor. Even though Fred was born in Illinois, his family's real home was Wisconsin, where both his parents came from. This connection to the Midwest shaped Fred's simple and relatable image later in life. When Fred was 2 years old, his family moved to Madison, Wisconsin. This became the start of a childhood that shaped who he was. Fred's early life was filled with music because of his father. By the time Fred was 5, he was learning the violin. But life wasn't easy. His parents separated when he was still very young, and Fred moved back to Wisconsin with his mother. They didn't have much money, but his mother worked hard to support them. They settled in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, where Fred's mother was born. Fred loved Beaver Dam and always remembered it fondly. Later in his movies, he even gave nods to his hometown, like in Pardon My Past, where his character dreams of starting a mink farm there. Fred was a bright student and a great athlete in high school. At Beaver Dam High, he was top of his class and earned 10 varsity letters in sports. He graduated at just 16, showing early on that he was determined and talented. Music stayed a big part of his life. He played in a local band and saved money from working at a pea canning factory to buy a saxophone. With it, he started his first band, Mac's Melody Boys, and performed locally. Even though he was talented, Fred often got stage fright. This was something he struggled with throughout his career. Fred went to Carroll College in Wisconsin on a scholarship for sports. He worked hard, juggling studies, football, and performing in bands to make money. But Fred had big dreams. In the late 1920s, he left Wisconsin and went to Hollywood. He wasn't thinking about acting yet, he wanted to succeed as a musician. At 20, he arrived in Los Angeles with his saxophone, hoping for success. But life in Hollywood was tough. Fred worked odd jobs, including selling sheet music at a store near the famous Grauman's Chinese Theater, where his handprints would later be placed as a star. Fred's big break in music came when he joined the Gus Arnheim Orchestra, a popular band that performed at the Coconut Grove nightclub. In 1930, he recorded his first and only hit song, All I Want Is Just One Girl. His voice and charm stood out, but the music career didn't last. To make ends meet, Fred tried other things, like taking night classes to become a newspaper cartoonist. This didn't work out, but it showed how creative and hardworking he was. While playing in a band called the California Collegians, Fred's good looks caught the attention of a talent scout. The scout didn't notice Fred for his music, but for his natural charisma and presence. Fred got a screen test with Paramount Pictures, which opened the door to acting. Before he became a star, Fred appeared in small, uncredited movie roles. His first was in Girls Gone Wild in 1929. These early roles gave Fred a chance to learn about filmmaking even though they weren't glamorous. One fun moment came when his band appeared in a movie called Wild Company. It was a mix of his music and acting worlds. Fred's first credited movie role came in 1935 with Grand Old Girl. It was a small part, but it was a step forward. Fred MacMurray's big break came in 1935 with a movie called The Gilded Lily. He starred with Claudette Colbert, who was already a famous actress. The movie came out on January 25, 1935, and it changed his life overnight. Fred played Peter Dawes, a reporter who falls into a love triangle with Colbert's character and a rich Englishman played by Ray Milland. People loved how Fred and Claudette worked together, and they ended up making 6 more movies as a pair in the next 10 years. The movie made a lot of money, over $1.5 million, which was a huge success back then. Critics loved it too, calling Fred's performance charming and natural. What's interesting is Fred almost didn't get the role. It was first offered to Cary Grant, but Cary had a scheduling conflict and couldn't do it. That lucky twist gave Fred his chance. Just a week after The Gilded Lily came out, Paramount Pictures signed Fred to a 7-year contract on February 1, 1935. He started with $350 a week, but his pay went up every year. By the early 1940s, he was one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars. After The Gilded Lily, Fred became really popular in romantic comedies. People loved his friendly personality, good looks, and funny timing. He worked non-stop in 1935, starring in 7 movies that year. One of his best movies during that time was Hands Across the Table, where he worked with Carole Lombard. It came out on October 18, 1935, and was a big hit, earning over $1.3 million. Critics loved it, and Fred's career kept growing. By 1936, he was making $4,000 a week, which would be like earning $75,000 a week today. Fans loved him so much that he was getting around 1,000 fan letters every week. Even though Fred became great at romantic comedies, it wasn't easy for him at first. Carole Lombard, who was known for her humor, had to help him loosen up on set. She even joked around by sitting on his chest and saying, "You better be funny, or I'll pluck your eyebrows." Fred took the advice and worked hard to improve, which helped him succeed in so many movies. Fred's success also came from working with amazing actresses like Carole Lombard. Together, they made 4 movies. After Hands Across the Table, they starred in The Princess Comes Across in 1936, Swing High, Swing Low in 1937, and True Confession later that same year. Audiences loved their chemistry, and all the movies were hits. For example, Swing High, Swing Low was the most successful Paramount movie of 1937, making $1.9 million. Fred played a musician in that movie, showing he could act in both funny and serious scenes. Their last movie together, True Confession, came out on December 24, 1937. It was another hit, earning $1.4 million. By then, Fred had become really comfortable with comedy and kept up with Carole's quick humor. Even though they worked so well together, they were never romantically involved. In fact, Carole introduced Fred to his first wife, Lillian Lamont, at a party in 1936. Fred and Lillian got married that same year on June 20 and stayed together until Lillian passed away in 1953. MacMurray's life took a dramatic turn with his role in Double Indemnity. At first, he didn't want to take the part of Walter Neff. On February 16, 1943, when director Billy Wilder gave him the script, MacMurray was shocked. He was 34 years old and known as Hollywood's nice guy, with a career built on light comedies and musicals. His most recent film, Standing Room Only, 1944, had been a big hit, earning over $2.5 million and keeping him as Paramount's top male star. The idea of playing a criminal, an adulterous insurance salesman, felt like a huge risk. MacMurray feared this role could ruin his career because, at the time, strict movie rules meant criminals had to be punished on screen, and audiences might reject him in such a dark role. In a 1972 interview, he said, "I threw the script across the room and told Billy, 'You're trying to kill my career.'" MacMurray doubted himself, too. He had never formally trained as an actor and started out as a saxophone player in vaudeville. His move to acting relied more on charm than dramatic skills. The character of Walter Neff was complex and morally ambiguous, a type of role he had never played. MacMurray even told Wilder, "I'm a saxophone player. I do like comedy with Claudette Colbert. I don't know how to play this kind of character." Throughout filming, his self-doubt showed. After every take, he asked Wilder, "Was that okay? Did I get it right?" Billy Wilder, however, was determined to cast MacMurray. After the initial rejection, Wilder spent 6 weeks trying to change his mind. He approached many other actors, including James Cagney, Gregory Peck, and even George Raft, who usually played gangsters. None of them accepted the role. Wilder didn't give up. He cornered MacMurray at lunch, visited him at home, and even followed him to the golf course. On March 27, 1943, Wilder caught him in a studio parking lot and spent 3 hours explaining why he was the perfect choice. His vision for the film, Wilder believed MacMurray's nice guy image would make the role even more shocking. He told MacMurray the role might win him an Oscar and hinted that other actors were interested. Wilder even had Barbara Stanwyck already cast as Phyllis. Dixon called MacMurray to encourage him. Finally, after a private screening of Wilder's previous film Five Graves to Cairo, MacMurray agreed. On April 5, 1943, he signed the contract, ending Wilder's 49-day campaign. When Double Indemnity premiered on July 3, 1944, MacMurray's transformation stunned audiences. Critics were amazed by his performance as a charming but corrupt insurance salesman turned murderer. The New York Times called it a revelation, and Variety praised his ability to make evil seem disturbingly ordinary. The film became a massive hit, earning $5.7 million at the box office and receiving 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Although MacMurray wasn't nominated, his performance became the film's standout. Even James M. Cain, who wrote the original novel, praised MacMurray in a letter, calling his portrayal terrific and memorable. The success of Double Indemnity changed MacMurray's career forever. Before the film, he was always cast as the wholesome good guy. Afterward, he started receiving offers for darker roles. Between 1944 and 1949, he appeared in 7 film noirs, including Murder, He Says and Pushover. Some fans were shocked by this new image, sending him mixed reactions in letters. While some criticized him for playing such dark characters, others applauded his depth as an actor. MacMurray's salary also rose dramatically, and he gained more creative control over his work. Fred MacMurray's life changed when he signed a contract with Universal Pictures on February 23, 1949. He wanted to break free from being stuck in the same kind of roles. In 1950, he acted in a Western movie called Never a Dull Moment, where he played a performer trying to adjust to ranch life. The movie got mixed reviews. Some people thought it tried too hard to be funny. Still, Fred didn't give up. He kept trying new things, like in 1951 when he acted in Kind Lady, a serious movie where he played Pete Sandiage. It wasn't a big hit, but it showed Fred could handle dramatic roles. Then, in 1952, he started filming Fair Wind to Java, an adventure movie. It came out in 1953, and Fred played a tough sea captain. This was very different from his earlier lighter roles. Critics weren't sure he was the right choice, but it helped him move toward more serious acting. In 1954, Fred got one of his biggest roles in the Caine Mutiny. He played Lieutenant Tom Kiefer, a character who quietly manipulates others into rebellion against their unstable captain. The movie also starred Humphrey Bogart and was a huge success, making over $21 million worldwide. Fred's performance stood out, especially in a court scene where his character's sly and sneaky nature was clear. Critics loved it and said Fred showed how good he could be at playing complicated characters. Then, in 1960, Fred took on another bold role in The Apartment, directed by Billy Wilder. He played Jeff Sheldrake, a married boss who uses his position to have an affair. It was a big change from his usual nice guy roles. Audiences were shocked but impressed by how cold and heartless Fred made the character seem. The movie won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and it proved Fred could handle darker, more serious roles. In the late 1950s, Fred switched gears again and started working with Disney. On March 19, 1959, Disney released The Shaggy Dog, where Fred played a dad dealing with his son turning into a magical sheepdog. The movie was a surprise hit, making more money than some of the biggest movies of that year. This started a successful run of Disney films for Fred. In 1961, he starred in The Absent-Minded Professor, playing a quirky inventor who creates flubber, a substance that defies gravity. It was another hit and even got a sequel called Son of Flubber in 1963. Fred also acted in other Disney movies like Bomb Voyage, 1962, and Follow Me, Boys, 1966, where he played a scoutmaster in a small town. This movie was special because it was the last one Walt Disney personally worked on before he passed away. Fred's Disney movies made him popular with families and showed he could still entertain audiences in a completely new way. In 1960, Fred became a television star with the show My Three Sons. The show was about a widowed dad raising 3 boys with the help of his father-in-law. It was one of the first TV shows to focus on a single father. The series was an instant hit, ranking 13th. In the Nielsen ratings during its first season, over its 12-year run, My Three Sons saw many changes, including a switch from ABC to CBS in 1965 and the addition of new characters. But MacMurray remained the steady center of the show, appearing in all 380 episodes. He became a household name, securing his legacy as a television icon. When he was approached in 1960 to play Steve Douglas, MacMurray was already a big movie star and didn't want to commit to the long hours of a weekly TV show. To solve this, he created a unique arrangement called the MacMurray method. His contract said he would only work 65 days a year, spread over 2 blocks, 40 days in spring and 25 days in fall. This meant that the production team had to shoot all his scenes for the entire season during these periods. It was an innovative approach, but it required careful planning and a lot of effort from everyone else on the set to make this work. The scripts for all 30 to 36 episodes of a season had to be ready in advance. Scenes were shot out of order, so all the kitchen scenes, for example, would be filmed together, followed by the living room scenes, and so on. This required the actors to constantly adjust and maintain continuity. The crew had to ensure everything looked consistent, even if scenes from the same episode were filmed months apart. Fred MacMurray earned $150,000 per season for this schedule, which is about $1.3 million in today's money. It allowed him plenty of free time to enjoy his hobbies, especially golf. This method became famous, and other stars like Henry Fonda on the Smith family later negotiated similar deals. However, this arrangement caused problems for the rest of the cast. Maintaining true continuity was a big challenge. Young actors like Don Lin, who played Dodie, had to deal with noticeable changes in their appearances during the breaks. For example, during one season, her teeth were growing in, and this was visible in scenes filmed months apart. To keep things consistent, the cast had to get weekly haircuts even if they weren't filming. Guest stars faced even bigger challenges. Many had to come back months after shooting their first scenes to finish episodes, often struggling to match their earlier performances. Sometimes, the quality of the show suffered. Viewers could notice moments where MacMurray's reactions didn't fully align with the other actors or where the timing of dialogue felt slightly off. MacMurray's limited schedule also created tension among the cast. William Frawley, who played Uncle Bub in the early seasons, struggled the most with this setup. Coming from the live, traditional filming of I Love Lucy, he found the disjointed schedule frustrating and frequently voiced his complaints. These tensions contributed to his departure in 1965. Don Grady, who played Robbie Douglas, had to learn how to act as if MacMurray's character was present when he wasn't. Grady admitted it was mentally exhausting and made it harder to feel connected to his on-screen father. Stanley Livingston, who played Chip, said the cast sometimes went months without seeing MacMurray, which made it difficult to build a sense of family off-screen. The filming schedule also impacted relationships. Tim Considine, the eldest son Mike, said it was hard to form a bond with MacMurray because he was around so rarely. Grady called him a ghost father because he would appear, work intensely for a while, and then disappear for months. Barry Livingston, who joined as Ernie, shared a story about needing advice during a personal crisis but realizing MacMurray wouldn't be available for weeks. Interestingly, MacMurray's absence seemed to add a certain mystique to his presence. Stanley Livingston once said that when MacMurray was on set, it felt like a special event. Everyone worked harder and stayed focused. While the unconventional method created challenges, it also highlighted MacMurray's influence as a star. His contract not only changed television but also showed how much star power could shape production in Hollywood. Fred MacMurray was known for being a reliable actor on screen, but behind the scenes, things were often tense. One of the biggest issues happened during the filming of Double Indemnity in 1944. Fred and his co-star, Barbara Stanwyck, looked great together on screen, but they had trouble working together. On March 15, 1944, while filming an important scene where their characters planned a murder, they argued over how the lines should be said. Fred thought Barbara was rushing her lines, and Barbara thought Fred was overacting. The fight got so bad that Fred walked off the set, and filming was delayed for 3 hours. Director Billy Wilder had to step in to calm them down. Things got even worse a few weeks later. On April 2, 1944, Fred accidentally stepped on Barbara's foot during a take, and she screamed in pain. After that, she refused to film with him for 2 days. The studio was so worried about the delays that they threatened to suspend both actors' contracts if they didn't work things out. Later, Barbara's diaries revealed that she had a secret crush on Fred, which may have made things even more awkward. Despite all this, their performances were praised, and Double Indemnity became a huge success. Critics loved their electric chemistry, and the film premiered on July 6, 1944. Years later, Fred denied any problems on set, saying in a 1970 interview, "Barbara was a consummate professional. Any rumors of discord were greatly exaggerated." However, crew members said otherwise. Cinematographer John F. Seitz wrote in his memoirs that he had to adjust the lighting to hide the actors' discomfort with each other in some scenes. Fred also had problems with Billy Wilder during The Apartment in 1960. Fred played a character named Jeff Sheldrake, who wasn't a good guy, and Fred didn't like how mean the character was. On October 12, 1959, they were filming a New Year's Eve scene when Fred refused to say a line because he thought it was too cruel. Wilder argued that the line was important for the character, and they argued for 2 hours. The fight only ended when Jack Lemmon stepped in and came up with a compromise. Another big disagreement happened on November 3, 1959. Fred wanted his character to be more likable, but Wilder wanted him to be colder and more calculating. Fred got so upset that he threatened to quit the film, and the studio had to call an emergency meeting to calm things down. Shirley MacLaine later said the set felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Despite all the drama, Fred's performance was praised when the film came out on June 15, 1960. He even got a BAFTA nomination for Best Foreign Actor. Later, Wilder admitted that Fred's resistance made the character more interesting. He said Fred's resistance to Sheldrake's darker aspects paradoxically made the character more complex and compelling. Fred's career had other moments of conflict too. While filming The Egg and I in 1947, Fred argued with Clet Kohler over who would get top billing. Fred walked off set for 3 days until the studio decided to give them equal billing. During the Caine Mutiny in 1954, Fred clashed with Humphrey Bogart over how a scene should be done. Bogart accused Fred of trying to steal the spotlight, and things got so tense that the director often had to separate them. On the set of The Absent-Minded Professor in 1961, Fred refused to work with child actor Kevin Corcoran, saying the boy was unprofessional. Disney executives had to step in to make sure the movie got finished. One of the most shocking stories came years later in her 2005 memoir. Polly Bergen wrote that Fred made unwanted advances toward her while filming Kisses for My President in 1964. When she rejected him, she said he became hostile, which caused tension on set and led to several scenes being reshot. Despite stories like this, some co-stars still defended Fred. Jack Lemmon said Fred could be difficult, but he was always professional when the camera rolled. Any personal issues disappeared. As Fred got older, his reputation for being difficult grew. It wasn't because he acted like a diva, but because he had a very strict way of working. While filming The Absent-Minded Professor, Fred insisted that all his scenes be filmed at once, even if it caused problems for everyone else. This became known as the MacMurray method, and he used it later on the TV show My Three Sons. Because of this, other actors sometimes had to perform with stand-ins or even pretend Fred was there when he wasn't. William Demarest, who played Uncle Charlie, joked, "I've had entire conversations with Fred where he wasn't even in the room." Directors began hesitating to hire Fred because of this. Alfred Hitchcock considered him for The Birds in 1963 but decided against it, saying, "Fred's a fine actor, but I need someone who will be there for the whole production, not just their own scenes." Fred's method created strange situations, like when a guest star on My Three Sons had to film all their scenes with Fred in one day, even though the scenes were for different episodes. Fred's talent kept him working, but by the end of My Three Sons in 1972, it was harder for him to get roles. His last major film was The Swarm in 1978, where the director shot all of Fred's scenes in 1 week to fit his schedule. Later, Fred admitted in an interview, "I suppose I wasn't the easiest person to work with, but I always delivered on screen. Isn't that what really matters?" Fred MacMurray's life was shaped by his relationships and how he lived away from the spotlight. He married twice, and both marriages were important to him. His first marriage was to Leland Lamont. They eloped on June 20, 1936, running off to Las Vegas. This shocked everyone, including the press and the people at his studio. Their marriage lasted 17 years, ending when Leland passed away in 1953. They adopted 2 children, Susan and Robert. Susan was adopted in 1940, but it wasn't formalized until 1942. Robert was adopted in 1946. Leland faced serious health problems, including issues with her kidneys and heart. Later, her cousin shared that Leland also suffered from bulimia, which may have worsened her health. A year after Leland died, Fred married actress June Haver. This was on June 28, 1954. They had met in 1953 at a party called the Gay 90s Party, hosted by John Wayne. Their connection grew quickly. Fred proposed to June using actor Red Skelton's pinky ring, which he considered lucky. This happened during a casual trip to a drugstore. They planned to marry in August but surprised everyone by marrying earlier. June had been married before and divorced, so she had to give up her Catholic faith to marry Fred. The couple adopted twin daughters, Catherine and Laurie, in 1956. They said the girls came right out of the incubator because June could not have children after a bad fall at Fox Studios. Their marriage lasted 37 years until Fred died in 1991. People doubted their marriage would last because of their 18-year age gap, but they proved everyone wrong. June left acting after they married. She said, "I lost all desire to act. I'm remaining a private citizen and will stay at home and work. It has been supplanted by something better now that I have 4 children and the family. I have a lot to keep me busy." Fred was famous for being very frugal, even though he earned a lot of money. In 1943, he made $420,000 in 1 year. That's like earning $6.5 million today. This made him the highest paid actor in Hollywood at the time and the 4th highest paid person in the United States. Still, he was very careful with money. He would bring his own lunch to work in a brown paper bag. Sometimes, it was just a hard-boiled egg. After Easter, he would bring colored eggs to the set of My 3 Sons for months, just so they wouldn't go to waste. On a hunting trip, Clark A.L. noticed Fred didn't bring lunch. When Clark asked about it, Fred said, "Oh, I'll just eat what you leave." Even though he was wealthy, Fred lived a modest life in a 1969 interview. He said, "I have a couple of apartment houses and a ranch up north and a home here in Brentwood, but when you say rich, I have nothing like Bob Hope or Bing Crosby or Joel McCrea." He and June didn't live like typical Hollywood stars. They didn't hire butlers or chefs, and June did most of the cooking herself. Fred's careful handling of money probably came from living through the Great Depression. It helped him become one of the wealthiest actors in Hollywood. Fred also made smart investments in real estate, which added to his wealth. In 1936, he bought his first apartment building for a very low price. Later, he sold it for a big profit. One of his most famous purchases was the Bryson Apartment Hotel, a 10-story building in Los Angeles. He bought it in 1944 for $600,000, using money he earned from the movie Double Indemnity. The building had 97 apartments and was one of the largest in the Wilshire district. Fred owned it for 30 years. In 1941, Fred bought a huge ranch in Northern California's Russian River Valley. It was 1,750 acres and became one of his favorite projects. He raised prize-winning Aberdeen Angus cattle there and sold beef to the best steakhouses in Los Angeles. Fred also owned several luxury apartment buildings in California and was part owner of the Beverly Hills Tennis and Country Club. He even had investments in oil wells in Orange County and a knitting mill in Los Angeles that made yarn and thread. These investments made him one of the richest actors in Los Angeles. Fred downplayed his wealth, though. In a 1977 interview, he said, "If I sold everything, I'd be worth maybe $3 million to $4 million. Maybe. After Fred died, his family kept his ranch going. In 1996, they leased it to the Gallo Winery, which now makes wine under the MacMurray Ranch label. Fred's daughter, Kate, still lives on the ranch in a cabin Fred built himself. His legacy lives on through his movies and the ranch. His roles in Double Indemnity and The Apartment are still celebrated, and the MacMurray Ranch wines keep his name alive in a completely different way.